My name's Rob, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Rob.
I have experience with these steps with the help of God. I'm a Big Book Step Study sponsor. I'm working on my amends, and I try to practice 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. I want to thank Joe for asking me to come out here and speak. I don't get out here too often. I'm not a morning meeting type of person. I like to sleep in on Saturdays. I want to get up, I want to work out, and I want to do other stuff. But sometimes I get out here when somebody asks me to speak. Trying to think about what I want to say. I think we all know how to drink. We all know how to do other things, you know. I just didn't know how to stop. You know, once I started, I just couldn't stop doing it, you know. And I didn't know I had the allergy to it that set off the phenomenal craving, which turns into an obsession and compulsion. I just thought I was just having fun. There was something wrong with me. I loved doing it. I did it for about 25 years. In and out of a lot of different prisons in Massachusetts as a result of it. This reading talks a lot about the family, and I was just sitting here and I'm thinking that I have two brothers and two sisters, and when me and my brother was in a teenager, probably late teenager, 18, my brother was like 20, and my oldest sister she was probably about 23 at that time. We were in 3 different prisons in Massachusetts as a result of alcohol, you know. And later on, in our 30s, we were all back in jail again. And I was in the same prison with my sister. You know? And when I think about that, I think, how do you think that affected my mother? Having 3 out of the 5 of her children locked up in various prisons in Massachusetts as a result of alcohol. You know? My brother happened to get sober for a long time, and then he relapsed, you know, and he got in a lot of trouble. He started robbing banks, got arrested, did like 10 years in federal prison, and he got out. He's been out since 2008, but this is like an original alcoholic idea that he came up with, and I think it's crazy, but he doesn't. And he said to me, he says, you know what, if I just drink alcohol and I smoke marijuana and I don't smoke crack cocaine, I won't rob banks. That doesn't work for me, you know. And you know what the funny thing is? That he's been doing it since then. But he doesn't live in Salty anymore, where we're from. He lives in Maine, and that's what he's been doing, you know what? And some of the readings it talks that some of us can stop or we can moderate, you know. And just when I thought that a few of us in my family had this disease, me and my other sister and my brother, my sister was able to stop. You know what I mean? She was really into cocaine and she stopped. And now she just like drinks once in a while. Unfortunately, me, I have the allergy. Once I do something, the best it ever gets is I get locked up, you know. And you know, at the end of my drinking and doing other things, I ended up homeless, sleeping on the streets. I had nowhere else to go. I had the idea in my head that if I could just get every single person out of my life, I'd be doing okay. And that's what I did. I pushed every single person away from me, or I stole from them, you know. And in the end, I was all alone. I had what is called an emotional bottom. If you don't know what an emotional bottom is, I couldn't drink anymore. It was stopping my sickness, but it wasn't stopping the way I felt inside. I would drink, I would do other things all day, and at night I'd be crying. And every night I would ask God, please don't let me wake up. You know, and every time I woke up, I knew what I was going to have to do to get what I needed to get. You know, and I ended up in Ad Care Hospital one of many times. You know, I've been in a lot of different detoxes in Massachusetts. I know how it feels like to go into one detox, leave, go out, drink again, go into a different one, bounce in this one. Never do anything that anybody suggested to you. My friend says it best, my friend Butchie, he says, what do I want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous for? They're going to talk about alcohol and I'm going to want to drink. You know, and then he says, what do I want to go to Narcotics Anonymous for? They're going to talk about drugs and I'm going to want to get high. You know, and that's the lie that we tell ourselves. You know, that's the lie that I used to tell myself. If anybody who knows me knows that I'm really not much of a talkative person, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, and my wife spoke here at the beginning of the month, and she likes to say this sometimes, I found a voice in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I may not talk much outside of here, but most of the things that I do in Alcoholics Anonymous is speaking in different places, you know. And I ended up in Ad Care Hospital. I ended up in a marble shelter. Didn't have one single person I could have called for help. And that's when my journey started, you know. I was 37 years old when I got sober. I'm 50 now. I was in a 10-man room with 10 other people, and I really didn't want to be there. I don't know if, I'm sure some people can relate to this, but you know what? I didn't plan on getting sober when I got sober. You know, I didn't have anywhere else to go. You know, and I figured, you know what? I lived in the projects from Southie. I might as well try Marlborough, Massachusetts, right? And and I started to go to meetings, you know, and things started to change for me, you know. But for my first 4.5 years, I ran around, I chased Alcoholics Anonymous around. What I know today, I was doing the second part of step 1 and the first part of step 12. My life's unmanageable, let me help you with yours, you know. Right? And I really enjoyed doing that. You know, but you know, I did a lot of commitments. I still do a lot of commitments today. You know, the only difference is my message has changed. But when I was about 4.5 years sober, I started to become restless, irritable, discontented. I was full of fear, and I didn't understand why. I understood why when I came to Big Book Step Study. I understood that I had untreated alcoholism. I had put down alcohol and drugs, but I didn't change any of my behaviors. I mean, literally, if you saw me when I first got sober, you wouldn't even come near me. Because I would say, you know what, if we get a little bit closer, we're going to have a problem. You know, I had a really bad attitude, and a lot of it was directed towards myself. You know, and my street behaviors, I was still doing them in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was still lying, I was still cheating, I was still stealing. I was sleeping with people that I shouldn't be sleeping with. And people would come up to me and say, you need to stop doing what you're doing. And my answer to them was, you need to mind your own friggin' business. And if you get a problem with that, we can take it outside and straighten it out. You know, and I just had an attitude, you know. But when I got involved in the steps, that changed, you know. I went to a meeting in Bolton when they started that meeting over there. After the meeting, somebody raised their hand, and I went right up to somebody and asked them to be my sponsor. You know, it happens to be the same guy that belonged to an open speaker meeting that I've belonged to for years. You know, and I did this work in probably like 7 months. You know, he read the first 63 pages to me. I started writing. I had over 500 resentments, about 100 fears, and whatever I had on my sex conduct. And when I did my 5th step with my sponsor, after that, he said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was 5 years sober at that point. And at that point, I felt like I became part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and the real reason why, not only because I was restless, irritable, discontented, but the real reason why I wanted to get involved with this work was to really help somebody else. Because before that, I could only tell you to go to this meeting, come to this commitment, and do this. You know, I had a message, but it wasn't a message of recovery, and it didn't have depth and weight. You know, it was just a message. You know, but that's the only thing I knew, though. You know, it's not like Big Book Step Study was like in around my area, you know, and I knew about it because I really didn't know about it. And getting up to step 12 and to try to practice these principles in all my fears. But I will just say something briefly about having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps to try to carry this message to alcoholics. I was at a meeting in Bolton, probably like, I don't know, like 7, 8 years ago, and this lady Vivian was speaking. And she was speaking on the first part of step 12, and she said, my spiritual awakening was that my eyes are now open. And I can really relate to that statement, you know, because I see things so much more clearly today compared to what I used to. Before, I couldn't even look people in the eyes. If somebody looked at me longer for a couple of seconds, it was what do you got, a problem? You know what I mean? And today when I look at people, it's because I'm an honest person today, you know, and carrying the message is something that I've never stopped doing it. It's the one thing that keeps me sober. You know, and the only difference is today my message has changed from a message of a mess to a message of recovery. You know, and the principle of the 12th step is service. All right, and it's to be service of anybody, not just people in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, so I've been fortunate enough to been able to go back into the prison system. You know, and to go there, to bring ex-offenders there, become a reentry volunteer where I bring people like me that have been in prison before to go back there and speak to the guys in jail and to be of service to them. You know, I'm a firm believer that, you know what, nobody has to go back to jail again. You can get out of jail and you can stay out of jail. You don't have to keep going back to jail. And unfortunately, there's not enough of us that do it. But you know what, I'm one of those people that do it, and I go there not only to remind myself of where I used to be or where I can be again if I choose to pick up again. You know, and that's one of the reasons why I go to Ad Care Hospital, so I don't have to sit in Ad Care Hospital anymore. I go to the state prison in Walpole, so I don't have to go to Walpole anymore. It's really pretty simple, you know. So this reading, a lot of the steps, they kind of lead up to the other steps, and to try to practice these principles. So if you go back to, there is a solution. In there, it says, we feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And it's easy to come in here and talk a good game. You know, if you really want to know what I'm doing, what type of person I am, just ask my wife. Ask the people I hang around with, because I only hang around with about 5 people, but I know a lot of people. But I hang around with about 5 or 6 people. They've all done this work, and the sponsees that I hang around with. And they could tell you what type of person I am, you know. And, but the third step talks about, do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not always going to be spiritually fit. I'm not always going to be spiritually fit. I'm going to say things that I don't want to say. I'm going to end up making amends for those mistakes. You know, if we were all perfect, we wouldn't even need to be here. Why would I need to be here? And I also know that if I could stay sober on God alone, I wouldn't need Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, step 8 and 9 says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It's anybody, not people that are just alcoholics. You know, I mean, am I letting somebody pass by me, you know, when they're trying to get out and take a ride? Am I holding the door for some lady who wants to, you know, get in before me, you know? I always had good morals, especially when it comes to older people. You know, always let older people go before me, whether I'm in the line at the store. It doesn't really make a difference to me. You know, it's about being respectful. And so today is May 25th. In May 25th of 2006, my mother died of cancer. And I was able to see my mother like 5 times before she died. You know, and I'm grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous because I was able to go there and to see my mother. You know, and I'm grateful that I'm still sober today, almost 14 years later. You know what I mean? And I didn't use my mom dying as an excuse to drink and do drugs. You know, it helped me. And what I realized about getting through that situation is there's nothing in my life today that will make me pick up alcohol or drugs. It's a choice. You know, my sister died on May 17th of 2016. She died from this disease, one of my sisters. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to get sober. She wasn't able to get this program. She wasn't interested in getting this program. You know, she was happy doing what she was doing. And I remember going in Southie all the time. I'd go up on Broadway. She'd be up on Broadway hanging on the wall with the other homeless people. And you know, I'd give her money because she'd be shaking so bad that she needed a drink. You know, and she was happy doing that. You know, and that's what my service of being in AA has allowed me to do. You know, not to have contempt against anybody that drinks. I'm no different than anybody else. You know what I mean? But in the amends process, which was difficult for me to write letters to them and to read those letters. My sister's ashes were spread along Castle Island in South Boston, and I was able to go down there and you know, write a letter, read it to my sister. And every time I go there, I talk to my sister. My other sister has my mom's ashes. When I made amends to her, I wrote a letter to her. I spent a little time. It was a little strange. It was kind of like one of my first amends. She was like in a little box, and it was a little strange. But you know what? When I wrote that letter and I read that letter too, I felt a little bit of something. You know, I felt a little better. You know, my mother has become part of my prayers at the end of the day. If I'm still sober and I haven't heard anybody today, I said, please let my mom know that I did the right thing today. You know, and but we can't shield ourselves from alcohol. This reading talks about it, and it says it right here. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. You can't escape alcohol. You can't run from it. It's everywhere, you know. But as long as I'm spiritually fit, I go to Chinese food places. I used to like to drink in Chinese food places, but now when I go to Chinese food places, I just go there to eat. So my brother-in-law's wife's coming to stay with us in June, and she's a traveling nurse, and she drinks. She's not an alcoholic, right? And my wife says to me, "Are you going to be okay if they have wine? If she has wine in the refrigerator?" I said, "If I'm going to pick up something, it's not going to be wine, believe me." But you know, it it just doesn't bother me. When I look at alcohol and other things today, it's a temporary solution to a permanent problem. I'm always gonna be an alcoholic, I'm always gonna be an addict. I have a thinking problem, you know, and it's what I do when something happens. And today I choose to go to God, my understanding, you know. My first thought is still to do the wrong thing, it's still to fight people, you know, but my first thought today when something goes wrong, it's not alcohol or drugs, which is completely huge to me because I could never stop thinking about it my whole life, you know. Back in step 10 it says, we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. That sanity is being defined as soundness of mind, you know. And my thought process has changed as a result of doing this work, and I don't have, some days I have that craziness going on, but most days I don't, you know. And this reading talks about bottles that are simple, you know, our problems of our own makings. I know today that I don't need to go any further than the nearest mirror to know who the problem is. It's me, it's always been me, it will always be me. I may blame you, you, and you, but you know what? It's always been me. You know, and as long as I'm connected to God, then I'm going to be okay. You know, but it's not every day. It's not 24/7, more often than not. But you know what? I know when I am, and I know when I'm not. And when I'm not, I can do something about it. You know, I can reconnect with God. Somebody told me a long time ago, you can start your day over anytime you want. You know, and this reading, you know, it's really about what I'm doing outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's really what it's about. Am I practicing these principles? You know, and there's 12 principles. Some meetings have them listed on the wall. You know, and the ultimate principle is service. You know, whatever service it is to you. Those who know me know I work in treatment. I've been working in treatment for years. You know, but to be able to help people there. You know, not with my story of what I've done and stuff like that, but just to be able to just be helpful. And sit there and just listen to somebody, because some people just need to talk to people, you know, and just to be able to sit there and listen to people, because I'm not really a big talker. You know, I never have been, I probably never will be, but I talk in Alcoholics Anonymous. The majority of my time it's spent on commitments. I go to Big Book Step Study, I go to Concord Farm, which I do a Big Book workshop there. I go to Pondville State Prison. They do a Big Book workshop there. I do Walpole's a 1, 2, 3 step meeting, and I do Big Book Step Study in AdCare. You know what I mean? And so most of my time is being of service to other people. I'm also a firm believer that everybody's got to find what's going to work for them. You know, because what I'm doing may not work for somebody else. Let's face it, some people don't like us. You know, they call us Nazis, they call us everything else. You know, my answer to them is, you know what, I'd rather be called a Nazi or a Big Book Step Study thumper than a piece of shit, scumbag, and I won't even list all the other names that other people have called me. And you know what, they were right at that point, but they're not right today. You know, and as a result of going through this work, I've changed, I've been able to help people. I helped my friend Joe back through this work, and to be able to watch people literally do this work from the beginning all the way to the end, to the point where they're sponsoring other people. And the first part of Step 12 talks about it, that this is an experience you must not miss. You know, because sometimes we don't see the changes in ourselves. I can't see the changes in myself. I only know by what people tell me. You know what I mean? But I do know that I'm not the person that I used to be. And I also know that I may not be where I want to be, but I'm definitely not where I used to be. So if you're just checking out this work, you're just reading or writing, you know, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. It's about uncovering, discovering, so we can recover from this disease, and then we can help other people. So anyways, I'm grateful to be here and be sober. Thank you.